Okay, here's part 2. I hope my battery lasts so I can get through this because it's flashing at me. So we're halfway through this book, which is going to be my reading book. And I will, if you didn't watch part 1, I'm going to keep track of the books that I've read throughout the year, probably 2 years, like the other one lasted, and also record quotes from those books that I like. So in the center of this signature is The Wizard of Oz. And this is cut out from a children's book. Vintage ledger. There's that other Fairyland page and another Mrs. Coggs image. I love this. I just love that hat she has on. And I love the smile on her face as she's reading. And it seems to me that she's reading a book about Fairyland because of that smile on her face. And there's an index card that I copy dyed, and it has one of my vintage gift tags on it. Here's a copy dyed paper with crochet trim. Another vintage gift tag, and from a children's reader, The Vowels. Here we have the daisy trim again from Hobby Lobby, an illustration from the Alice and Jerry books, stitched onto scrapbook paper, which is a pocket. And here's an illustration from this book that I made the book out of. And a Mrs. Coggs illustration, digital. And I will link that below in this video also. There's some vintage paper here and a vintage gift tag. This is the vintage paper that this is a scrap of. Here's from a children's reader. And this is from another children's vintage book. It says, "See what you can do right now." There's some washi tape on this. I love this page. I used a scrap of the green scrapbook paper. I love that color. And then this is from the Robert Louis Stevenson book of Child's Garden of Verses. "Come up here, O dusty feet, here is fairy bread to eat. Here in my retiring room, children, you may dine on the golden smell of broom and the shade of pine. And when you have eaten well, fairy stories hear and tell." I love fairy stories. So here we have a Mrs. Coggs image. She looks like a medieval lady reading a book, but I don't really know what time period she is, but that's what she looks like. And here's another Mrs. Coggs image, and her green dress matches the greens, coordinates well with the greens of this page. This is a piece of scrapbook paper with seafoam green design, and then I punched this out of this paper with a scallop punch and folded it over, and then put on some reinforcements that I stamped and inked. And then this is a piece of trim that I got from A Tattered Dream, Denise's shop. And I was hoarding that too, and so I used a piece of it, so now I'm free to use it for other projects. I love it. It's so pretty. There's another lady from the washi tape. This is from the Everyday Journal, Lori Jaggedish's shop on Etsy, and I will link that. I love this collage with some vintage rickrack, a little piece of gorgeous lace, and a couple of fabrics. Another image from the Alice and Jerry books with a piece of fabric stitched around the top and an inventory tag and some seam binding. I also have some inventory tags in my shop. This is an illustration from this book, The 5 Little Peppers and How They Grew. There's another piece of the pale yellow eyelet and some vintage rickrack. Another fabric collage, and I stamped on the coffee dyed muslin. And this one has some trim, which I got from Hobby Lobby, and a Mrs. Coggs image. And this is a Mrs. Coggs image, and there's a index card. Another lady from the washi tape. Children's book illustration. This one has fabric along the edge, a little tiny piece of fabric, and a piece of the daisy trim. This is cut from the Bambi book. Vintage ledger. It's my favorite vintage ledger with the purples and pinks and blues. This is from that gorgeous Snow White book. This is cut from a children's nature book, I think. And this is a gorgeous image from a children's book. I stitched it to this coffee dyed scrapbook paper, put a little piece of trim on it, and it's a side-loading pocket which holds a Mrs. Coggs image, and it has a fabric tag stitched on, so it's easy to pull out. There's a Kate Greenaway image that I glued on. The paper was torn a little bit here, so I glued her right there. And one of my favorite children's illustrators is Eloise Wilkins, so this is one of her illustrations, and I glued it on as a pocket and just put a couple pieces of index cards with some stamping on them in there. I love this fabric. I bought this fabric because I'm going to be making a Woodlands book or two, but I have enough of it that I could include it in this journal because I love it. Crochet trim, a vintage reader book, Peter Rabbit here, some vintage ledger here and here, another image from The Wizard of Oz. This is another Kate Greenaway illustration from a different book. Here's from the children's reader. Cute little mouse. And I love this trim that I got from Hobby Lobby with the gray elements. Goes good with that mouse. And another Alice and Jerry illustration. Another lady from the washi tape. I'm not sure about this one. I'm not sure what that is. Kind of looks like they gave her a beard, but it's some kind of decorative element that I think it's attached to her ears. I'm not sure, but it just looks like a beard. So here is another piece of trim and a piece here. This really pretty scrapbook paper, a black and white illustration cut from a children's book. Here's a tag with a Mrs. Coggs image. I just had to trim the sides of it a little bit so it would fit on the tag, and I stitched it on. And here's another illustration that I stitched coffee dyed paper. My sewing machine ate a corner of that, but it's just for me and I don't care, so there it is. There's the Snow White page. Raggedy Ann and Andy. I remember my mother reading Raggedy Ann stories to us when I was a child, and I absolutely loved them. It's another lady from the washi tape. This is a little piece of pieced border or something that my friend gave me of her mother's quilt scraps. So I stamped the word dream on coffee dyed muslin and stitched it to it and stitched that on as a flap. And she looks like she's dreaming about the book she's reading. Look at that secret smile. I love that image. This is from Mrs. Coggs. And then this is index card with a stamp on it. Another illustration from a children's book, a little mouse. I think this was from the story, The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. And the end has another children's playing card. Piece of scrapbook paper with this Collie illustration, which I had to include because as I was growing up, we had a succession of Collie dogs. I grew up in the country, and I loved my Collie dogs. Whenever we lost one, it wasn't long before we had another. And here's a mama reading to her child, Mrs. Coggs. And then the back has a vintage library pocket, which I covered up the title with washi tape, and this part with an Alice and Jerry illustration. This came out of an old library card, which I won't journal on it or anything. I just put it in there just because it's from a library and this is a book about reading. And then here's the last of the Mrs. Coggs illustration. No, there's one inside too. So here's a lady reading, and I stitched her to some scrapbook paper and then stitched that to another piece of scrapbook paper, which I folded into an envelope and stitched and included another Mrs. Coggs illustration. And I put a piece of lace here, and it fits right in that pocket. So I love this book, and I can't wait to start using it. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please leave a comment below, and I hope you all have a Happy New Year. Bye-bye.